Hello and welcome to Mapping the Master Plan. I'm Tom Bott. I'm the town planner here in Kingston, Mass. Today our show comes from Studio A at PAC TV, the larger studio, because we've got big stuff to talk about. Today's show is about infrastructure, and we'll get into specifically what that is. My guest today is Scott Turner. Scott is one of our consultants from Nitsch Engineering. He is a civil engineer, a PE, and a planner, an AICP. In fact, there are more initials after his name than his name actually makes up. Scott, local kid, New Bedford, went to Tufts and then Georgia Tech for grad school.
That's right.
And can you confirm for our vast viewing audience that we've never met before?
We've never met before.
Seriously?
No, not seriously. We've known each other a while.
But we've never had a beer or anything like that?
Never, ever, ever.
Okay, so I see you're going to have a hard time with some of the credibility issues Scott may have today. And also with me today is Paul Basler, our Superintendent of Streets, Trees, and Parks. Paul, raised in Rocky Nook. In fact, he bleeds Rocky Nook low-tide mud if you cut him. He has been our highway superintendent for a lot of years. Served our country as a CB, where he researched road conditions in Hawaii, Antarctica, and New Orleans. Nobody in Kingston more popular than Paul. He gets more calls about missing mailboxes in the winter than anybody else. And Paul, for our vast viewing audience, can you also confirm that you don't know me?
I have no idea who you are, sir.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming today. We are going to be talking today about infrastructure. And in the master plan, infrastructure breaks down into two sections. They're officially called elements of the master plan, but one of the things we try to keep for our viewing audiences, we try to cut down on the jargon. So if you're going to say something kind of jargony, you have to qualify that. And that's what this is for. This is the jargon bell. In the event that someone slips into jargon, anybody is allowed to pick up the bell and ring it, and we'll explain exactly what that is.
Awesome.
So two sections of the master plan: public services and facilities, and circulation and transportation. Now, in the state law, it says that services and facilities identifies and analyzes existing and forecasted needs for facilities and services used by the public, and the circulation element provides an inventory of existing and proposed circulation and transportation elements. So the things that we're familiar with as far as those services are water, sewer, roads. There are additional things people may not think about: stormwater, our transfer station, with all things that Paul does a very good job at staying on top of. So with that, let me just turn it over to Scott and talk about a little bit about where we're looking into the master plan and sort of where we're at in that process as we've been moving along here.
Well, we're moving through the master plan, moving towards completion of a draft. We've more or less, we're kind of at the tail end of the collection phase, where we collect information, we get input from the different departments in town. We talk to residents, we get ideas from them about what are concerns to them, and where I'm involved with the infrastructure side, as you described, it means talking to them about things like traffic and the MBTA and the road system, and also water and wastewater and so forth. But typically what people want to talk about is traffic and transportation issues. That's something that everybody is an expert on. Everybody deals with it every day, so they all believe that they are experts on it. And so we get a lot of good information from the general public.
And we heard a lot about that over the weekend, a couple weeks ago at the Design Charrette.
That's right.
People concerned about traffic and roads and how to handle traffic on roads and things like that.
That's right. Yep. We heard a lot of people talking about their favorite intersections, their least favorite intersections, the amount of traffic that comes through town, where the pinch points are, where where there may be some backups, things that they think could be fixed, and so forth.
And we know that creating or relieving traffic, and as we've talked about, traffic is sort of in the eye of the beholder.
That's right.
That relieving traffic is not just simply making a new road somewhere, because roads are expensive, they have environmental impacts, and they are also generate demand, and they generate more traffic as well.
That's right.
So there's not a fix. So we look at trying to work with the things that we've got and improve them with some traffic strategies.
Right. Well, there are a lot of things that you can do to try to relieve traffic. One of the tensions in this plan, I guess, is that there's a strong desire to not just address traffic, but also walkability, which means sidewalks, and also to accommodate cyclists, bicycles. So what we look at is we look at what is in the public right-of-way, the public realm. And when I say the public right-of-way, I mean the area that is owned by the town, kind of between the property line on each side. And you have to look and see how that can be reconfigured to accommodate more traffic, whether it means changing the width of lanes, accommodate sidewalks, accommodate bicycle lanes. At intersections, we look at things like traffic signals. We look at things like roundabouts, those types of things.
And a roundabout is?
Did you want to ring your bell?
No, I just want
right.
to clarify that.
A roundabout is it's like a rotary, but it's smaller. So whereas a rotary is very large, has really, there's a long path around the rotary, a roundabout is more confined, and it's something that, your path through it is not as long. Most people are familiar with traffic lights, and they want to see traffic lights at intersections, and that's a way to control traffic in and out. But a rotary basically allows people to kind of meander through. And in most cases, virtually all cases, they work better than a traffic light. So those are some things that we're considering as well. But you have to have the right configuration of roads coming into an intersection, and you have to have the appropriate amount of space to do them.
And as we know from talking to Paul for years about some of the roads that we know we've got some issues with, trying to deal with them in a context-sensitive way. And context sensitive being that you just can't come in and put a new, wider road in an historic neighborhood in Kingston. We have been talking about this about Main Street for years, about trying to rebuild Main Street within the curbs that are already there, because we don't want to make the roads wider. We don't want to cut down the trees that exist along Main Street. So we've been looking for some way to deal with the condition of the road, and maybe deal with some traffic issues that's possible, but without basically decimating the streetscape that we see out there. And Paul and I have had a lot of discussions about how we go about doing that with the state. And how's that been going?
It's going. It's an ongoing process. As you're well aware, the section of Main Street you're talking about is also designated Route 106. And that causes its own concerns in redesign, because on a numbered routeway in the state of Massachusetts, you have to follow the state guidelines.
So if a number's got a road, if a road's got a number, then there are different rules from the state that we have to follow. And those include 106, 27, 53, 3A. Am I missing some?
Route 3, Route 80.
Yeah, there's plenty.
We have plenty of roads in Kingston that are designated numbered routes.
So those things that we would like to do something with, we have to pass muster with the state on those requirements.
Yes,
or
sir.
remove that numbering system somehow.
That is correct. I am hopeful that moving forward, that the state has changed its guidelines since the last time we visited this back in '08. And I'm hoping starting this fall or maybe next spring to have some public hearings, some public meetings about what the residents along that route, around the residents and the rest of the town would like to see. As you know, that is the most historic section of our town. And by going in there and following some of the old specs that the state has, it would widen that road. It would decimate the large growth trees. It would take some of the New Englandly feel off of that area. And as you stated in the beginning, as almost a lifelong resident of the town, I do not want to see that happen in that area.
But we got at least it covered for the time being. We just recently had a repaving of Main Street.
Yes, over the course of the last 10 years, the NSTAR Gas, which is now Eversource, has been upgrading their utilities along that stretch of road. And they finally completed all the necessary infrastructure along that section. So back in late August, we had our paving contractor come in and put a new 1.5-inch coat of asphalt over it, which makes it a lot quieter ride for the residents that are living along that section.
So we talked a bit about roads, but there are other things that we have as well in town as far as infrastructure. We touched briefly on sidewalks and bicyclists, and I know Paul is one of those folks who feel like bicycles aren't something people are going to do year round. So we've got to look at those alternative transportation modes. We have some service from GATRA under their limited bus routes. So it's not just about driving cars to places. It's about what other alternatives can we have to try to take some of that pressure off the roads. But we also know that everybody in Kingston who drives on our roads isn't from Kingston. All across southeastern Massachusetts, from 27 and 106 and 50, they all meet at Gene Creedon's front yard at Main Street and 106, which is one of those sort of problematic intersections. It's the one we have a high crash count for because of those sort of people who stop in to look and then somebody gets tagged behind them. So in addition, we had a discussion last night at the Selectmen's meeting about pay-as-you-throw, about our transfer station, because the transfer station has been recently reconfigured, looks fabulous. It's got leaching fields underneath of it for a potential sewer plant expansion underneath of it as well, so we use a lot of forethought in that. And then pay-as-you-throw is an idea just to minimize the amount of trash that we have to pay for to get rid of.
Yes, a pay-as-you-throw system is a fee-based system where the residents of the town purchase bags, and the cost of each bag is determined by the budget that we have for the solid waste section of our town. And right now it's active in 143 of municipalities in the state of Massachusetts. It is, in my opinion, it is a fair way of disposing of your household trash. As you're well aware, a house with 2 people living in it will generate a lot less trash than a house with 6 people in it. Right now, we don't delineate between 2-person residents, 5-person residents, or multi-residents. You pay a flat fee for your sticker, and that covers your trash disposal for the year. A pay-as-you-throw system encourages the residents to recycle more, because the recyclables you can dispose of at no cost to yourself. The only fee you're really paying for is that per bag. And that per bag fee usually covers the disposal costs for our end product at the CMAS plant in
Because when we
Rochester.
take our trash somewhere else, they're charging us by the pound or by the ton.
They charge us, correct, they charge us by the ton.
So the more we take out of that, the less we have to pay for that, and lowers our cost, lowers the taxpayers' cost. And it actually creates a more sustainable trash collection system.
Yes, town of Kingston was one of the original towns to sign on with CMAS back in the late 80s. And CMAS was going through the communities looking for volumes of trash so they could go to their bankers for financing for their waste energy plant. Kingston did enjoy a $34 or $35 per ton fee up until December 31st of last year. As of January 1st of this year, that price went from $35 a ton to $70 a ton. Wow. In the current contract, which is a 10-year contract, there are escalation costs that are incurred every year. The first 5 years is 1%, the second 5 years is 1.5%. So starting this year, the cost is $70 a ton. Starting January of next year, it'll be $71.40 a ton, and it'll keep adding on to that. By encouraging the residents to recycle more, therefore reducing the amount of trash they're throwing in those trash cans, and it reduces the overall disposal cost for the town.
So we save the planet, we save money.
Correct.
Swell things, both of those.
Well, being a green community, we're trying to think and trying to save the environment, the planet, and for the most part, saving the taxpayers' dollars.
Saving some Benjamins.
Correct.
Now, one of the other things that you two are both involved in is our stormwater issues. And people don't really think of stormwater as a utility. But we have, and Scott can probably explain this better, sort of a mandate from the feds about dealing with stormwater, and where we have catch basins and drainage basins and subdivisions and things like that. We really don't have sort of the past that we used to have about just water going into these places and infiltrating into the ground.
Right. I mean, traditionally, the way stormwater has been handled, it's been handled as a waste product. And so what's happened is, probably 30 years ago, engineers looked at ways to just remove water from roads, sidewalks, wherever areas where people travel. Get it out of there as quickly as you can, move it to someplace else. Usually it just went into a wetland location, untreated, so it wasn't cleaned at all. And what we found, or what the engineering community and the environmental community found, was that this was really doing some damage to our environment, to our ecosystems. So back in the mid-'80s, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection came up with Stormwater Management guidelines, which basically said that you need to treat water, you have to prevent downstream flooding, and so forth. And so the paradigm shifted a little bit. it's starting to shift again, or it has been shifting again over the last 10 to 20 years. Whereas before we were taking stormwater, collecting it in catch basins, putting it in pipes under the ground, conveying it to wetlands or low areas. Now the whole thought behind stormwater management is to collect it at its source and infiltrate it into the ground. So that way you're recharging your aquifer and your groundwater like it would before pre-development. What you want to try to do is you want to try to get your developed areas to behave like, from a stormwater perspective, like they're undeveloped. And so that is the new paradigm in stormwater management, and the federal government and EPA and Massachusetts DEP. We're in the midst now of a change where our stormwater guidelines are going to be shifted to really require you to do that type of change in management of stormwater. And so some of the work that my company's been doing is
You can say Nitsch engineering. It's okay to get a plug in for our past viewing audience.
So part of the work that Nitsch engineering has been doing over the last 20 years is really in this area. And one of the ways that it started was that we started doing a lot of work at colleges and universities where they had a mandate for sustainability way before the sustainability became a more commonplace term. And so we were able to kind of push the envelope in terms of sustainable stormwater design. And now what we're doing is we're bringing it to private site development, to municipal projects, to Mass DOT projects. And so what we do is we incorporate stormwater facilities into our projects, but we do it in such a way that it's not a standalone infrastructure piece. It's something that's incorporated into I guess, the livable environment. So I'll give you an example. Whereas now you have catch basins on the side of roads up against curbs, what we might have is we might have cut-throughs into a planted area that's a depression. Where water
cut-through as in a place in the curb, an opening in the curb?
That's right, like a cut in the curb or an opening in the curb where water can kind of go into the curb, go into a depression that's planted. And if you get the right landscape architect, you plant it so that it looks like more of a planted area rather than a infrastructure area, and then water can go into the ground. And those are the types of things that we've been involved with, and we hope that Kingston will consider moving forward because it's more sustainable, and it creates a more livable environment. Something
is that what they call rain gardens? Those depressions with the plants in them?
That's right. That's what we call a rain garden and so forth. So there's all kinds of different strategies you can use, and things that we look at are things like porous pavement and rain gardens and bioretention basins and so forth. And if you want
to get too far, we'll have to hit the bell if you get too many of those terms in there. But there's a lot of different strategies.
Exactly, that's right.
And we know because a few years ago we bought a Vector truck, and one of those things we have to do is maintain these catch basins by going out and vacuuming out all the sand and stuff that goes into them, and haul it off because it's considered toxic. Is that correct?
It's considered, according to DEP, as hazardous waste.
So you can't just dump it anywhere. You've got to take it to a special disposal site.
In the past, the town of Kingston used to dispose of our sweet sweepings on our own landfill. But back in '99, per DEP's orders, we had to close our landfill. Right now, we have a contractor that comes in. He'll truck it to either Crapo Hill landfill, or he has another landfill out in western part of the state that he trucks it to.
And one of those tensions that we have with stormwater is that we can treat most of the things that go into the stormwater except chloride, salt. Sodium, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And of course salt is very important for keeping your roads safe and trying to balance that mix. And Paul and I have talked about this for years about how salt is cheap and effective and easy to dispose of, but it has that implication of it has more wear and tear on the roads, and it has these stormwater implications as well. So once again, as with everything else, we're trying to find a balance of how we make things work and how we make them work that we can afford to pay for and afford to live with for the long run.
That's right. I mean, and in some cases, what you can do is, when you do treatment, some of the salt, it kind of dissolves in the water, but some of it also sticks to sediment. And so when you remove the sediment, you remove some of the salt. Also, if you put the right plants in your stormwater facilities, it'll help remove the salt. So you have to make sure that the plantings are right. You want to have salt-tolerant species so that the plants will thrive and survive, but also provide some level of treatment for the salt.
Excellent. And that sort of ties into some of those sustainability issues that we were looking at in the master plan as well, because while sustainability wasn't a component in the previous master plan, it's one of those things that a lot of people are talking about, and we'll have a sustainability issue as well with our plan as we're providing it. So this morning we had a meeting, Paul and Scott and I, with our wastewater guys and our water guys. So we're collecting some information from them about where we're at and what our sort of, if we can make some projections on use, because that's one of the things they talk about in the master plan is a projection of use.
Right.
And right now we're sort of maxed out with sewer.
That's right.
Because there's a place to dispose of it, extra sewer, but there's not an extra batch reactor, one of these poop stirrers. Can I call it poop stirrer? Is that a technical term? At the plant to treat this stuff, and that's a big price tag. Like a lot of things that we talk about that might be helpful.
That's right.
An $8 million price tag for sewer users is a lot for the 1,554 sewer users.
Right.
Without a significant expansion for perhaps economic development purposes or things like that. So that's one of those discussions that we'll continue to have going forward with, how do we deal with those sort of things.
Well, one of the things about, water and sewer is that, although it's not the most glamorous topic, it's something that it has to be there. When it's not there, it really causes a problem. And so you have to balance your development goals and how your community is going to change with your water capacity and your sewer capacity and so forth. So you're right. If we can't expand the sewer, then you have to go to septic systems, and septic systems have their own limitations. When I say septic systems, you mean you're disposing of your sanitary waste on your property.
You can say poo if you need to.
No, that's fine.
Sanitary waste.
You can
sanitary waste, a technical term we can all understand, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that people love about Kingston is our soils. That's why people for years have mined sites in Kingston and taken our soils off to other places. This is great for septic systems and things like that.
That's right, and for stormwater too.
Yeah. And the only places we've sewered are the places that really aren't capable of handling septic and things like that.
Well, also one of the because you have sandy soils in some cases, what happens is water moves through the ground very quickly, and so in areas where if you have septic systems, and the septic systems are put in sandy soils, what's going to happen is the sewage is going to go into the ground. It's going to move through fast. It's not going to have enough opportunity to be treated, and I think that's probably what happened, in the Jones River and Kingston Bay, and that's why you had some water quality problems there. Was because of and that's why those were identified as areas to be sewered first, because you want to remove the sewer system, the septic systems in those areas, and help increase water quality or improve water quality.
Well, and as Paul can tell you, as practically a lifelong resident of Rocky Nook. Back in the old days, it was kind of quiet in the winter down there. And so where you had a septic system that was in sort of a clay and rocky yard, it wasn't a big issue for 6 weeks or so. But when people started living there year-round, there was a whole lot more septic systems failing and a whole lot more stuff going into the bay and affecting the shellfish beds, which is why we have the treatment plant that we have today, as I understand.
You are correct.
So what else are we looking at in putting together for our infrastructure elements as you see it as we're moving forward with this? We're going to talk about water, we're going to talk about sewer, we're going to talk about transportation, not just roads, but how to make better use of roads and how to find other ways to deal with that. And also in some design issues in trying to slow down traffic.
That's right.
With things like raised speed tables, neck downs, perhaps rotaries, all things the plow guys love, right?
Well, speaking on behalf of the plow guys, it's a lot easier for us to plow the streets that are straight. There's not any impediments. There's no raised banks. There's no raised. It's better and easier for the plow guys if it's just flat, straight. But because of the amount of speeding going along throughout the streets in the town of Kingston, especially in the subdivisions, some of those traffic calming devices will have to be implemented. And I'm sure the plow guys will work to do the jobs that they do as best as they can.
Yeah, but historically we don't get that much snow.
No, I mean last year was a fluke. We're all hoping at 117 inches, and as your highway superintendent, I hope we never see that again. But realistically, we have to plan for stuff like that because we have to be ready for anything.
And that's one of the other things you and I talk about. That Miles and I, my dog, love the snow. Paul you get to stay up for a couple days straight when we have snow. So you don't quite have the love for snow.
I'm not a big lover of snow right now, no.
So that Hawaii research you did about snow storage is not really paying that many dividends these days.
No.
Okay.
Well, one of the things you want to keep in mind, though, is that although maintenance is very important because there's fiscal implications to it, you want to design your community for livability,
Exactly.
not necessarily just for maintenance. And so there's a trade-off that has to occur between these somewhat unusual or different elements that might be a little bit different to maintain, might be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more work to maintain, but also really enhance your community. So.
Yeah, way back when I first got here, we had an appliance repairman on the planning board, and we had a double-barreled street with a median in the middle, and he said, I hate those things. And I said, Mr. King, we don't build the subdivisions for the appliance repair guy. And I got to stay anyhow, even though he was a long-serving member of the planning board. But it's about balance. It's about looking at where we're at and where we want to go to. And that's the whole issue with the planning board, identifying where we're at and where we want to go to and identifying some tools to try to get there. Mm-hmm. And then after the plan phase is completed and we've got a document, then it's about implementing the plan with the tools we've identified. And so that'll be part of the continuing fund as we move forward with the Kingston Master Plan. So I want to thank you guys for being here today. Scott Turner, Nitsch Engineering, Paul Basler, Superintendent of Street Trees and Parks in Kingston, the most popular guy in Kingston, I think. Thank you all for being here today, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Tom.